Stay classy, Golden Eagles. So this is part 2 of our inferencing lesson with our book, A Picture Book of Harriet Tubman. When I left you guys, I asked you to think about what kind of inferences you can make from this sentence, and I'll read it again and then I'll tell you the inferences I made. He said that if she ran off, he would tell her master, and soon the patrollers and their dogs would be after her. Now, I thought about this one a little bit, and I think it has a couple different ways that you can inference from it. One, I kind of thought that her husband, John, was scared that if Harriet ran away, he wouldn't see her again. That if she ran away, that she might be killed, she might be chased down, she might be taken to another plantation and he wouldn't see her again. And he was also fearful that if she ran away, that he would get in trouble. So I kind of came up with 3. One, that he was afraid that he would lose her, like they would not be married, he wouldn't see her ever again. 2, that she might be killed or captured trying to escape. And 3, that he might have like retribution or actions come against him because she ran away. Do our inferences kind of line up? I hope they might. And obviously too, you could inference something completely different than I did, right? As long as you can kind of like explain your reasoning. And obviously you're gonna have to do that by yourself. I'm gonna continue. But Harriet had made up her mind. She started to plan her escape. Slaves often sang songs in the field. The afternoon before Harriet ran off, she sang too, and in the words of her song was a message to the other slaves. When the chariot comes, I'm gonna leave you. I'm bound for the promised land. For Harriet Tubman, the promised land was north, where she would be free. Harriet escaped at night with 3 of her brothers. They had no food, no money, and they didn't know where to go. Soon after they left, Harriet's brothers decided to turn back. They made Harriet go back too. 2 nights later, Harriet went off alone. I had a right to liberty or death, she said after her escape. If I could not have one, I would not have the other. Harriet ran to the house of a white woman who had once offered to help her. The woman told Harriet which house to go next to. The people in the second house directed Harriet to another house further north. Harriet was traveling on what was known as the Underground Railroad. Each stop on the railroad was the house of someone who believed slavery was wrong and was willing to help runaway slaves find their way to freedom. Harriet hid during the day. She traveled at night until she reached Pennsylvania. There was a law in that state against owning slaves. We're almost to our second stop point with our second sentence. Harriet Tubman was a free woman now. She felt like a new person. She said later, the sun came like gold through the trees and over the fields, and I felt like I was in heaven. I'm going to read that sentence again. That's the one that we're focusing on for our second round of inferencing. She said later, the sun came like gold through the trees and over the fields, and I felt like I was in heaven. Go ahead and hit pause and think about what you can inference from that sentence, then click play again, and I'll tell you what I think. Okay, so I'm going to read that sentence one more time for you guys, just so you can remember. She said later, the sun came like gold through the trees and over the fields, and I felt like I was in heaven. What I inferenced from that particular point was the feeling that Harriet had in that time. She had always been someone who felt oppressed. She was oppressed. She had always felt like she needed to do bigger and better, and she was always going against what she was being told. And now she had complete independent freedom. She felt like gold was shining down, like God was looking on her. She'd been waiting this whole time for a Moses, right? And if you guys don't remember, Moses was was a figure in the Bible who led his people away from slavery to freedom, right? The Israelites, okay? And she was always looking for that Moses, and I think at this point she's starting to see that she could be the person who leads her people, enslaved African Americans, out of slavery and into freedom. She felt the sun come like gold through the trees. She is seeing the world in a different way now that she's a free woman, and she felt like she was in heaven. She went from feeling like she was in down with the devil, and now she's up here with God, the place she wants to be. Okay, we're going to go ahead and continue, and I'll stop. We have 2 more inference points. This will probably take 2 more videos. During the years between 1850 and 1860, Harriet worked as a cook, dishwasher, and cleaning woman. She used much of the money she earned to make 19 trips south to lead about 300 slaves to freedom, many of them her own relatives. Harriet took them from one safe house to the next. Sometimes she led them as far as Canada. She was a conductor on the Underground Railroad. Conductor is the name of someone who operates a train. And since it was considered an underground railroad, she was the person who was leading or driving the train. At times, Harriet disguised herself as a weak old woman or as a man. She used songs as a secret code. When the runaways were hiding and it was safe to come out, she sang a joyful song, "Hail, O hail, ye happy spirits." The runaway slaves always recognized Harriet's husky voice. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so this is going to be the end of video number 2. Go ahead, end this video, and go ahead and click number 3.